Sometimes. So we are starting with some disasters right here, because first thing, Marko doesn't work. Second, I prepared my talk on the notice function of PowerPoint, but this thing doesn't support a double screen, so I have to improvise. But doesn't matter. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation for being here. My talk today is about Hurtado and his concept of liberty of conscience, Libertas Conscientiae, and I'd like to start by outlining why I'm interested, or why I got interested in this topic when not so long ago I started studying Hurtado. Well, my background is more from early modern philosophy, and I was working for some time, I'm still working on a project trying to find out what happens to the concept of natural law and the theory of natural law on the threshold from late scholasticism to early modern philosophy. I've worked so far a little on Suarez, but mostly on Vasquez, Gabriel Vasquez, the maybe adversary of Suarez. On the one side, Thomas Aquinas, of course, as a background, and on the other hand, Spinoza. And, well, if you are dealing with questions of natural law theory, you know that traditionally conscience is very closely connected with natural law. When I say traditionally, I mean in Thomas Aquinas. And since I didn't, in the work of Hurtado, which were available for me, had find anything where natural law was directly discussed, I just took the, say, longer route around and chose the liberty of conscience topic to find out what Hurtado understands by the topic of conscience and of its liberty, and to ask the question whether there is some, well, background of the old Thomistic concept of natural law within conscience or not. This also structures the structure of my talk. I will start with very simply giving sort of background talk about the natural law theory in Aquinas and how this is connected with what we would call conscience. I will then go to a short consideration of what Luther calls Libertas Conscientiae, since he's the one who threw this term into modern discussion. And third, I will then turn to the theory of Libertas Conscientiae in Hurtado in the Tempus Virtutibus Disputation number 79. So, to start with Aquinas, if we ask ourselves what does conscience mean in Aquinas' theory, we soon find that we don't have simply one concept in the original text, but two. First of all, we have to deal with a thing Aquinas calls synderesis. What is synderesis? Well, synderesis is what Aquinas calls a natural habit, and we heard something about habits this afternoon in the talk about praxis. Well, we talked there about habits like virtues or vices or something like this. Well, this is not what Aquinas means when he talks about synderesis. He says it's a natural habit, and that means it's not a habit like a virtue or a vice that you can acquire. I think I will simply leave it, and if I'm getting too little understandable, please give me a sign and do anything. Okay, so it's a natural habit. That means you do not have to acquire this habit. You have this habit as a rational being naturally. As soon as your soul, so to speak, exists, you have this sort of habit. So a habit is something by virtue of which you have something. And what do you have by the habit of synderesis? Well, Aquinas says you have by synderesis the rules of natural law. His idea is the following. We have reason, of course, and we have reason in a double way, or two possible ways of application. First for theoretical recognition, and second for practical thought. Well, now, theoretical reason, or reason in its theoretical use, has to use some basic principles that cannot be deduced and that are known per se and to everyone. Principles like the principle of non-contradiction. Yeah, this is a principle you have to use for every reasoning you do. It's at the same time a principle you do not have to deduce or you do not have to find anywhere, but you already have this, because without it you couldn't do any reasoning at all. And the way you have this principle is something which Aquinas calls a natural habit, namely the so-called habitus principiorum, the habitus of principles. He says this relying to Avicenna, I thought, and to his teacher, St. Thomas Aquinas, Albert the Great. Okay, now Albert's and also St. Thomas's idea is now that the same structure, that is a habit of natural principles and reason using it, is also true not just for theoretical reason but also for practical reason. So just as theoretical reason, also practical reason has some principles that are not to be deduced from somewhere else, they are not to be found in the world or empirically achieved, but that are the first and highest principles of every practical reason, namely natural law. And the great thing with this structure is, since it is a natural habit, every rational being has it. So the idea is, by virtue of this synderesis as a natural habit of the natural law, we can guarantee that at least some moral principles are universal. And they are not just universal in the meaning that, well, maybe we all have it, but we never heard of it, but they are not only per se nota, but they are per se nota known through itself for us. Per se nota quod nos, just like the highest principles of theoretical reason. You can find the quotation and the place where it is. So, synderesis dictio lex intellectus nostrum est habitus continens praecepta legis naturalis, the precepts of natural law, quae sunt prima operum humanarum, which are the first principles for human actions. So, this structure of habit of our having the basic principles of practical reason is the first dimension of conscience. It's the basis of our conscience. It's the, so to speak, substance of our conscience, which is then completed by a second dimension, so to speak, which is called conscientia. We know from our burden of conscience, and which is described by Aquinas as, say, the act of applying these principles we have in synderesis on action, that is, or on judgment of action. That is, the idea is we have the most common principles, and now we have to act morally, or we have to judge an act that has been done or is to be done, and we do this by applying these common principles to the object. And the act of this application is what Aquinas calls conscientia, conscience. So I think this is very important, that we in the, well, traditional theory stemming or coming from Aquinas and having been discussed, of course, at the school of Salamanca and later on, we have these two aspects of conscience. It's not just one, it's two aspects. And one of them is has a universal aspect, natural to all men. The thing is, it's why I'm stressing this, because synderesis is something also the heathens have. So you don't need to be a Christian or to be enlightened by the gift of grace or faith one of the few who have this, to be able to have a grip on these principles. But every rational being has these, no matter what religion he or she believes in. Maybe even if he or she believes in no religion at all. Doesn't matter. Okay. Talking about the natural law, lex naturalis, it's crucial to know what the law means in the first place. And Thomas gives a very famous and general definition. He says, well, a law is nothing else than an ordinance of reason, ordinatio rationis, for the common good, made by him who has the care for the community and promulgated. So these are four quite, well, crucial and quite controversial aspects of what a law is. First of all, it's something pertaining to reason. There will be many discussions whether law really belongs to reason or not, rather to the will. I will not go into this now here. Second, and this is one crucial point for me tonight, it has to be directed towards the common good. So this is the basic direction. It has to face the common good. Third, it has to be made by whom he has to care for the common good of the community. And third, it has to be promulgated. So if you are instituting a law, you have to tell the people that you have instituted a law. You cannot do it in a hidden way. Okay. Why is the common good so important for the definition of law and for the additional definition of the natural law? Well, because I will try to insinuate in my third part that this aspect of also natural law is on what some of the arguments of Hurtado dwells on. Okay. This is a general definition for every law, and if I say every law, it means there are several kinds of law according to Aquinas, can be arranged in a certain kind of hierarchy. First of all, there is the eternal law. Eternal law is the highest law of all the laws. It's what Aquinas defines it as the plan that God has with his creation. So the idea is God has created the world, obviously, and he has not just created a static one with nothing happening, but he has created a world which is alive, in which has a history. And this plan, which is enrolled within the history of the world from Genesis to Revelation, so to speak, is what is governed by the eternal law, which is God's providence on what is going to happen. That's the first one. The second one for my interpretation is natural law. We'll come to the relation of these laws later on, just in a moment. Then we have positive law, the lex positiva, and there are two different kinds of positive law. First one is the divine law, lex divina. And second is human law, lex humana. Well, what is divine law, if you don't know this? Well, the idea is God has this eternal law where he knows everything that's going to happen, but, and this eternal law, of course, is eternal, so it doesn't change, it doesn't come to existence and cease to exist, but it's there. Well, but during the course of history, God also had decided to give some more special laws, especially laws we explicitly know something about, namely the Old and New Testament. And these are laws, according to Aquinas, which come to an existence. They were given at the Sinai, for instance, and then taken away again, or they were given taken away when the lex of Christ came into existence. So they have a temporary aspect. They are not valid for all the time. That's why they are positive. They are set up, so to speak, set in front of us. And the same is true for human law, which is what we bring into the world, and which is for some time valid, but not for all the time. Can be revoked. Okay, how now do these laws interact, so to speak? I have indulged myself in a little graphic, and you will see why I won't do this quite often. So, first of all, we have the eternal law, second, the divine, third, the natural law, and fourth, the human law. So now, first of all, the relation between lex maritana and lex naturalis. The idea is that these both are kinds of law are not just independent from each other, just like there is a natural, eternal law, and there's the natural law, that is the structure of a reason, and both have nothing in common. But Aquinas says natural law is the way in which we participate in eternal law. It is not explicitly clear how this works. It's more a kind of analogy, since he says, well, we participate in the eternal law in as much as we are able to do something similar that God does with the eternal law. When the eternal law is God's providence for the whole
very good time.
Yes. God's providence for the whole creation, then the natural law, that is the structure of principal structure of our natural reason, is the means by which we are able to have providence concerning our own acts and the acts of our neighbors. So this is something he calls participation. So second, the divine law, of course, is directly posited by God, and this is why I don't do this very often. Lex naturalis is what we have in synthesis and engagement in conscientia, and we then use this basic structure to establish human laws, which are not only dependent on the natural law, but also on the divine law. That is what God has said us in the Bible as ordinations, or we shall do or shan't do, is also something that becomes part of our human law. Okay, and finally, all of this somehow leads to what is called human action, actus humanus. And this, of course, is far from being complete. It's just a very rough sketch on how you should think of some relations within this theory. Important is this one. This is the important part, the lex naturalis, which is natural, which is common to all human beings, and which somehow, via synthesis, works as some sort of mediation between the act and the eternal law. I stress this because this changes. Yeah, I'll give this around. So here I have here some summary of what I've just said. So you can just have a look at this. But so if we would find a thing like liberty of conscience, considering this structure, one would have to say, well, according to Aquinas, liberty of conscience would mean something like human beings are able to act according to the right reason on the basis of moral judgment, which is enabled by liberum arbitrum, by virtue of the synthesis, that is on the basis of natural law. Something like that would be the definition of liberty of conscience if he would have used this term, which he doesn't, or didn't. Who did was Luther, who wasn't the first to coin the expression liberty of conscience, Libertas Conscientiae. We find earlier sources like in Boetius, for instance, but he coined it for the modern debate. And he coined it good because he said, well, liberty of conscience, Libertas Conscientiae, Libertas Christiana, seu evangelica Libertas Conscientiae. So he very well defined what is to be understood by liberty of conscience. You can see it quite here, it's a Christian liberty. It's not the liberty we have because we participated in universal principles that every man has, but it's a liberty we have and only have as Christians. And well, yes. So what is this? What is the liberty of conscience to be? How is it to be described? Well, Luther says, well, liberty of conscience first of all means a sort of liberation, namely from law, and namely, first of all, from the Mosaic law, that is the Old Testament. The idea is, well, the Mosaic law was a law of fear that forced us to do things we didn't do because of love, but because we were afraid, because we were afraid of punishment and stuff like this. But now, being Protestant Christians, we now are free from this, because this is no longer the principle of our acts, or the principle of our self-understanding. But this isn't all. The second, Libertas Conscientiae, also frees us from the works, from apocalypse. That means, well, it's also true that we are not only free because we do good deeds. We can also be free, because we can also have Libertas Conscientiae without doing anything at all. It's not a question of what we do and what comes out of it. It's a question of how we are, say, informed by God's grace and the faith of God. That's why we shall in conscience not obey the old law, and also not the laws of men who somehow contradict our liberty of conscience. And second, we shall not be too confident in our natural ability to judge, because well, the only thing that gives us the freedom of doing the right thing is being given the grace of faith in God, and not being confident in natural laws, because the law of nature, the law of reason, is for Luther corrupted by original sin. 5 minutes left. That's okay. Come, give me. I had
some extra time, I guess, because there's no other.
I had to talk without microphone.
So you have 6 minutes.
6 minutes. You're too gracious. Okay. So, but I'm already at the end of this part. Well, the thing is, what I want to say is, for Luther, the frame of reference for conscience is not natural law any longer, and it's not the human law, but it's faith and the New Testament given by God, mercy and grace alone. So if we come back to our little great scheme, we can find that in Luther there's something missing, namely synthesis and natural law here. We have a direct connection, and not mediated by synthesis. And this has some consequences. First of all, there are 2 dimensions of Libertas Conscientiae. First of all, there's a theological one, that is what I've just described. Second, there is, say, political dimension, namely that Protestants then claim that this way of having liberty of conscience shall be something that is to be accepted by, well, other religions, most of all the Catholics. And of course, something that shall not be persecuted within the state, in the Catholic state. Of course, the second is founded in the first. Yeah, what I wanted to say in the conclusion, it's very important to see that for Luther now, Libertas Conscientiae does not mean something that is connected to highest principles of human reason. It does not mean something that is common to all human beings, because it's only common to those who are Protestants, so to speak. Yeah, and it's independent from supernatural. It's not independent from supernatural religious faith like the synthesis was. Okay. So for Protestants only, so to speak. Okay. I had another source. I just wanted to bring in to say, well, some of the Protestant followers of Luther had some different ideas about that, because they said, well, this kind of Libertas Conscientiae, that is not only freedom of my conscience, but freedom of my religion, why should it be something that is special only for Protestants? So this guy, this anonymous author from 1579 says, no, I think it is a natural law that there should be Libertas Conscientiae, now in the meaning of freedom of religion. And coming now to Hurtado, 3 more minutes. maybe it would be nice to come to Hurtado. Okay, what does he do? Well, he does do very interesting
You have
things.
liberty to go on.
Pardon?
You have liberty to go on.
Oh, yeah, I'm free of this. So great of you. Thanks. Well, what does he do? Well, the interesting thing is that he doesn't do something what we could expect. He doesn't go back to Aquinas, but he takes up Luther's distinction. He says, well, right at the beginning of this disputation, 79, well, liberty of conscience is something we use in a double meaning. First of all, we use it in what I would have called a more theological meaning, meaning, well, it's our spiritual and moral freedom we have as Christians in front of God and in front of other people. But this is something, he says, immediately adding a punch for Luther, that can be used good, maybe by Catholics, or bad, maybe by Protestants. Because Protestants think that this understanding of Christian liberty of conscience is something that lets them reside only on their conscience, not needing any outer rule to obey. So this is some sort of hypocrisy, or hybris, which comes from this. But interestingly enough, Hurtado also says this is not the thing that we'll be talking about. What he is talking about in this disputation is the political liberty of conscience, but still taking up the very thing Luther and the Protestants claim for themselves, namely the freedom of not being persecuted, not being punished for their belief. So he takes this up, but in taking it up, it turns it against the Protestants, saying, well, yeah, there are some people who claim this, but these are heretics. And now we have to discuss this liberty of conscience not as something that is maybe naturally granted to be granted by natural law, but as something a Catholic king in a Catholic state has to deal with. And the question is now, how does he have to deal with this? So there are heretics running around claiming for themselves liberty of conscience. And the question arises for the king, what is he to do with them? So liberty of conscience is defined as the subject's immunity against temporal punishment and penalization for professing a false religion. Okay. First thing he makes clear, well, whatever we say, both kinds of liberty. So, I see, must have swapped quotations there. Doesn't matter. So, both these kinds of liberty of conscience, there are two explicit and implicit one, are illicit. So, they are not legitimate. Unless there is an urgent cause. He also puts this in another way. He says, well, liberty of conscience is under no circumstances to be permitted, under no circumstances, within a Catholic republic, just for the purpose of the republic's flourishing. But it is to be permitted when a graver damage of religion is imminent, in that in no other way can be averted than by the permission of liberty. And third, he says, well, the rulers are bound to avoid any public sins that can be avoided without major damage. Thus, they are bound to avoid liberty of conscience as long as this does not cause major damage. So, what we have there is something quite interesting. On the one hand, he clearly neglects some sort of natural law basis for claiming something like liberty of conscience for heretics or anyone. On the other hand, he brings, in the same sentence, cause for exception. And this cause he brings, in my opinion, points back to what I've talked about earlier, namely the idea that what a ruler has to do in a state is to focus on the common good. Since the greater damage Hurtado seems to have in mind here is not just the damage of religion in this of true faith within a state, but he also speaks of, public turbulence, meaning probably something like what was happening in France, civil war-like situations. So a ruler has to try to avoid that for the sake of religion, the state goes into a state of turbulence and civil war. Something happened on the train this morning. Okay. This is one first aspect I think is important for a certain way in which Hurtado re-engages in some of the natural law discussions without calling them explicitly. The second thing is more interesting. He says, well, why can it be legit in some way to use something which is illegit per se, or illicitous per se? Well, he says, well, it can be allowed to use or apply liberty of conscience because both kinds, the open and the overt kind of liberty of conscience, are not intrinsically bad. But they sometimes can be something honest because of a good end they had to pursue, namely stability of the state. This is again the Latin. And in trying to explain what it means that something is not intrinsically bad, he openly refers to the definition of natural law. He says, well, an object is intrinsically bad if its concept contradicts rational nature or law. It's intrinsically good if it complies with it, and it's indifferent if its concept does not contradict or comply, but it now complies with the law or the rational nature now contradicts them. So he says, well, it's maybe not intrinsically good, but it's intrinsically not against natural law to grant liberty of conscience, and this is why it can be used as something that helps pursuing a good purpose. It couldn't be used for this if it was intrinsically bad, because no intrinsically bad means is allowed to pursue any purpose. So here have two kinds of liberty of conscience, and trying to come to an end. There's a third aspect, which the last one, in which I think Hurtado re-engages with some natural law thought, and this now quite explicitly, so to speak, because he says, well, if we at some point have granted explicitly the liberty of conscience within a state, then we have sworn an oath. And this means we have, we have gone into a sort of pact, a pact. And then something quite interesting happens, because then not just the group to which liberty of conscience has been granted, but also the group who grants it are now under rule of natural law, because pacta sunt servanda. So if you have sworn this to somebody, you have to cling to it. You cannot say, well, I sworn it because then you were strong, but next day you're weak and I can crush you down. This doesn't work. So interestingly enough, although at the beginning saying this is completely illicit, what Luther demands, he then develops on the argument to say, well, no, there's many aspects of natural law to be found in this conception. Okay, so I come to a conclusion because it's overdue. So, Libertas Conscientiae and natural law and Hurtado. Well, it's clear that it's not a precept of natural law to grant liberty of conscience per se within the Catholic state. But, however, granting Libertas Conscientiae is also not against natural law, since it is not intrinsically or by nature bad. It can gain a morally good quality, since it is a precept of natural law to care for the tranquility of the state, and granting Libertas Conscientiae can be something that helps achieve this aim. And fourth, furthermore, one's liberty of conscience, permissive or expressive, is granted. Its conditions are to be fulfilled by nature of law. Thanks for your